Hola, amigas y amigos. Welcome to the MíraLA Podcast. I'm your host, Arianna Lemus. This podcast is by women, for women, and anyone willing to listen to women. Enjoy the show. In this episode, I interview Jess Melgar Alvarez. Jess is a labor and employment attorney who specializes in union and benefits. She is a first-generation Latina of Salvadoran descent, born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. At the age of 18, Jess moved to Northern California, earning her undergraduate degrees from UC Davis and her law degree from McGeorge School of Law. As a lawyer, Jess has championed for workers' rights in the workplace from sexual harassment, wage and hourly violations, and workers' rights to unionize. Please welcome attorney Jess Melgar Alvarez. Hey ladies, welcome back to the MíraLA Podcast. Today, I will be speaking with attorney Jess Alvarez. Hey, Jess.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yay. So happy to have you.
Yes.
I would have to say that this would be, or you would be, the first attorney on our podcast.
Oh, cool. What an honor.
It's a huge honor. And you're a Latina.
I am.
A woman of color. You are not a new mom, but a
First-time mom.
Yes.
Yes.
And what else about you? Your resume is incredible.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. I born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. I have a little 19-month-old, runs around the house being crazy, but I'm a full-time labor and employment attorney. I like to run. I'm training for a half marathon right now.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there's so many things we could touch on, right?
Yeah.
Your background, your family life,
Mhm.
or your career. But I think I want to start with your career.
Yeah.
So what led you, or if I remember correctly in our pre-interview, you mentioned that you knew that you wanted to be a lawyer since you were 5 years old.
Yeah. When I was 5, I have an older sister. She's 5 years older than me. So like at 10, she decided she was going to be a doctor. She is. And she just announced it. And so I decided, okay, well, what's something else that's cool that I can do? And I just said lawyer. I am a very type A personality. So I ran with that idea as I grew up, as I went, and I just chased it. And here we are.
That's incredible.
Yeah, almost 10 years into practicing, and it's been an awesome ride.
So what was your why, or what kept you going?
Yeah, I think the biggest why was my parents. That's always been my why. I got into labor and employment because of them. They're blue collar workers. They immigrated from El Salvador during the Civil War. They started their life out here, and the older I got, the more I saw like the injustices in their workplace, right? And I knew at some point that was the kind of lawyer that I wanted to be. So with every, twist and turn and times I had to retake it, like I took the LSAT twice, before I got into law school. There were, it was a lot. But that was always what I kept coming back to, was I'm doing this for them who gave me so much up until now. So, and now what I do it is for my little guy. I want to show him that his mom is pretty cool.
And a badass.
Thank you.
Right? And the work that you do specifically focuses on workers' rights.
Not anymore, but yes, I have a workers' right background. I used to work for a nonprofit, CRLA, that focused specifically on labor and employment and workers' rights, from the farm, like workers on the field, to our blue collar workers, restaurant workers, package workers. Yeah.
And what would be like the basic 101 that probably every worker in our country should know, or maybe specifically to California?
Yeah. That would be that no matter your status, no matter how long you've been working, if you are working in California in particular, you have rights. You have the right to file a wage claim. You have a right to visit the different government organizations, from the ALRB, the NLRB, the DFEH. And I know I'm just saying a bunch of alphabet letters right now. The more I practice, the more they just come out naturally to me. But I think that is one of the biggest things, is that a lot of workers don't know that they have rights, and status is 100% irrelevant. no one's allowed to ask you about it. If you are working, even if it's like 30 minutes, you have a right to that.
And through experiences like that, because I know for myself, like I come from being a gig worker, contractor.
Mm-hmm.
There have been times where like I wasn't properly compensated or I
Mm-hmm.
got paid like months later.
Mm-hmm.
So in a situation like that, if I did want to file a wage claim,
Yeah.
what is that process like?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think what everybody needs to know, or the organization that everyone needs to be aware of, or government agency, it's the Labor Commissioner. So it's here in California. It's specific to California, although I'm sure other states have version of this, but it's the Labor Commissioner. That's where you go, you file a wage claim. And my favorite part to say is it's completely free and you do not need an attorney. I represented a lot of clients in wage claims because obviously it's good to have somebody who knows the process. But if you can't afford an attorney or don't know of a nonprofit organization that can help you out pro bono, go. Either way, they are very worker friendly. They will help you fill out the wage claims, figure out what exactly your issues are, what penalties you can claim, and then you just go through the process. It's a lengthy process. They're very overworked at the Labor Commissioner, but it doesn't hurt to try. I just reiterate that there's nothing to lose from it.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of this just stems from like lack of education,
Absolutely.
right? And people just not knowing, because I mean, up until this point, I like had heard of the word of like a wage claim,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to sit here and talk with you, I definitely want for you in this time and space to like educate people about all the years of research and education that you've acquired along the way through this process of like helping people in your community. And the inspiration of becoming a lawyer was because of your parents. I kind of want to transition now into like how all of these experiences have helped you become the empowered woman you are today.
I went to UC Davis, and at the time, I was probably I think I had one other Latina friend there. I hear now the school's become very much more diverse, which is fabulous. But at the time, I was one of the only brown faces around. And I think that continued to push me throughout my educational career, was to continue to break glass ceilings for Latina women everywhere. Whether it was getting your undergraduate degree, taking gap year, like learning how to navigate in this space that was probably not intended for me, and then taking that ownership of it. And and that's continued to push me to this day as I've kind of navigated my career. It's not what I thought it was once going to be. Like, I didn't see myself doing what I do now, which is I represent benefit plans in under a very specific federal law. And I love it. I didn't think I was going to go there, but I think giving myself a lot of grace and taking all my experiences and then just kind of allowing life to take me where it's going to take me, but just keep pushing.
Yeah, I think for everyone listening, I think it's important to trust the process and not judge it, and just know that like you're on a journey to embark on your path. And that looks different for everybody. Like going to school and getting a job after, like, or going to school and not getting a job after and getting some life experience. Like, I think like, I'm sure you can attest to this, like the years that you've put into becoming the career woman that you are, you had to go through some hurdles. And like through those struggles, like aside from your why of your parents, where would your mind take you in those dark times? And like, how did you pick yourself up off the ground and keep going?
Yeah. I mean, and I think one of the darkest periods of my life was probably my second and third year of law school. It was law school, a lot of studying. And I think mental health was something that I personally felt there's no stigma to it. But when it came to me and looking inward and realizing that I was starting to exhibit like certain symptoms of high anxiety, depression, it took me a minute to kind of really come to terms with that. And the third year of law school in particular, I remember, was just my place was not in a great place. So to this day, one of the things that's always pushed me forward is my faith. And I think just being, in whatever anybody believes in, but that to me, my faith really got me through a lot of the darkest times. And then it also reminded me that there is no shame in then asking for further resources, because God created scientists, right? And therapists and counselors. And so learning to find those resources as well. Law school was the first time that I visited a therapist. And I remember like even the anxiety going into her office because I'm like, what am I doing here? But since then, it's like open doors, you know, and I haven't been to therapy consistently, right, since then. Sometimes I take breaks, I feel better, I feel stronger. I've since started therapy again. And I think that's just been the biggest, I think, resource to get me through some of those darkest times. On top of my faith is seeking out those mental health resources.
And I love that we're talking about it, because it's important that we destigmatize the conversation around mental health, especially in a career like being a lawyer. You know, for people to assume that lawyers don't go through mental health issues is so silly, right? Because really stressful jobs like doctors and lawyers and, you know, all those high-end jobs, right? Like it's a very stressful environment, and a lot of people are counting on you, especially in your position with your clients and everything. So you said you started with workers' rights, and now you're moved on to unions, right?
Union adjacent, but yes.
And can you just kind of educate our audience about that line of work and the types of cases that you probably deal with?
So for a long time, for about 2 years, I think, of my legal career, I did work specifically with the labor organization movement. I worked for a government organization called the ALRB that focused mainly on farm workers' rights to unionize, which a lot of people don't know, but the right to unionize as a farm worker is only unique to California. The rest of the country has still not caught up with that. And so farm workers in other areas of the country cannot unionize. But California, being cool that we are, created and carved out that law. So for about 2 years of my career, I focused on that, enforcing the right to unionize as a farm worker, which then led me to my current career as an ERISA attorney, which is the Employment Retirement Income Security Act. It's a federal law that then focuses on the benefits that unions, once you've unionized, once you've come to the table, you've signed a collective bargaining agreement, a lot of unions then offer things like health plans and pension plans. And so that's where I come in, and I make sure that those benefits are collected, that the employers who've agreed to the union are contributing, and then that everyone's complying with it, and that workers are getting their benefits at the end of the day. So the true client is the union worker, the participant, right? That's who I ultimately fight for.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
I was just saying this to a fellow guest, that you are truly doing God's work.
Thanks.
And I think these are the types of guests that I want to bring on, like the people that are out there, like making a difference, you know, and changing people's lives. I'm sure like the feelings that you get after those cases have been won, or like you've, you know, after time and time again with like the same client and not seeing like that satisfaction and then getting to the results, I'm sure is just like indescribable.
Absolutely. I'm a little bit more far removed from my client these days, but when I was working directly with the workers, I think that was just what just drove home. I remember a set of sisters, that was probably my last client at my nonprofit before I moved into private. That was probably one of the biggest cases I've ever worked on. And I remember how much they're like, "Are you sure, abogada? Are we still good? Like, is it?" And then to know that they came out with a wonderful settlement, something they never saw coming, it was just like, that's what, like, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah. I know you're doing the bigger stuff, right?
Yeah, bigger picture for sure.
And then is the future of your career maybe owning your own law firm, or what? Where do you kind of see yourself in the next few years?
That's a great question. I've toyed with a lot of ideas, but I think what I keep coming back to is I want to make my way to the bench. I don't think there's enough female judges on the bench, but women of color sitting on the bench when it comes to, because I've come before a lot of judges, right? And sometimes their opinions, I'm like, you have a very skewed way of seeing the law. Like, and it's all, what a lot of people don't understand is the law is really up for interpretation, right? That's where lawyers come in. Unfortunately, judges, of course, are supposed to be neutral and unbiased. Obviously, they're bringing in probably subconscious biases and ways that they've seen life. And so I think at the end of the day, I think when I'm ready, I think I've always said, like, when I'm done having kids and all my kids are grown, I think I really want to refocus on, making my way to the bench. I think that would wonderful. Be really awesome.
I love that for you. Isabel Grace is a woman-owned florist business. Aside from making beautiful bouquets for every occasion, she and her team plan events to help you celebrate all of your family celebrations and milestones. From baby showers, birthdays, graduations, and weddings, Isabel Grace is a proud sponsor of the MíraLA Podcast, providing all of our guests their favorite arrangement of flowers. So talking about your family now, how do you balance being this driven career woman while also being a wife and a mother?
Yeah, it's probably one of the hardest things it's a learning process. It's a day-to-day thing, right? The biggest thing is making a plan. I was telling you this earlier. I was like, I'm such a type A person. I make plans after plans after plans, but since having my son, I've realized that plans change. So having a backup plan for that plan. So that's always been kind of like my go-to. I've always felt a sense of control, I guess, if I'm able to plan, but then showing myself a lot of grace when the plan doesn't go quite according to plan, because getting a 19-month-old to see where you're coming from is not always easy. And then so creating a lot of spaces for yourself and taking time for yourself. I think a lot of first-time moms don't do that. And probably I saw this in my family growing up. Like, my mom, she made her kids, me and my siblings, her whole life. And so by the time we left the house, it was like, who am I? And I saw that identity crisis. And I realized, like, the only way that I'm going to continue to show up for my son in the best way that I can is by actually taking time to myself, whether that is an hour at the gym in the morning, after I drop him off from daycare, going on a run, doing my therapy sessions, whatever it is, like really creating that space for myself where I can regroup, refocus, and then be able to get back into the job, the wife, the mom.
It's really beautiful and like really reassuring to hear you say that, because I think especially Latina women, it's just like our mothers, our grandmothers, always about everybody else except themselves, especially making sure everybody gets fed and then they are like left standing, eating. And it's like, it should be the opposite.
Absolutely. My brother always says, put the mask on first. And it's really cool to see, like, my mom now, like, as we're all kind of showing her the wonders of mental health care. And she quoted that back to me. She goes, well, you're right. I need to take care of myself first. And I'm like, absolutely, Mom. And it's never too late to start putting yourself first. It's a learned process, and it's going to feel incredibly uncomfortable and selfish. And I think that was probably one of the hardest things, especially after my son came into the picture, was, wait, I'm taking time for me. Like, he's defenseless. I'm his whole world. How can I do that? But understanding that, one, it's an hour. We've got help. We've got a village. And sometimes your village is small. Sometimes it's big, right? But whatever it is, like, taking advantage of the resources that you do have and not being ashamed to do that. So,
asking for help. Yes. Letting people know when you're not okay, especially being a first-time mom, and just like advocating for yourself, to your partner, to your village, that like what you're going through is valid. I did want to touch base about the postpartum depression and that experience, because I feel like that's something that a lot of women go through, but we don't talk about it a lot. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing today.
Yeah, I think I thankfully, I think I was ready for postpartum life in the sense of the depression, but I know that my anxiety did reach. So there's also a thing called postpartum anxiety. And that's where everything is catastrophized, right? At the drop of a hat. I think navigating those big emotions post baby was one of the hardest things. And it's still something that I'm learning to do every day. So like you said, learning to ask for help, right? And recognizing when it was time for help. Pre-baby, I had seen my therapist and I decided to take a month of leave. This is right after I had just gotten married and my work life was not going well and my anxiety was through the roof. I think that was the first time that I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And so that's when I turned to additional support through anti-anxiety medication, which was fabulous. And then I weaned off of it, right? I felt good, felt comfortable. I felt strong. Enter my baby. Where it, your whole identity becomes being mom, right? Especially those first 3 months or 4 months that you're at home with the baby, like your whole life is. So learning to navigate that new identity with, on top of that, really high anxiety was a lot. So I think just recognizing that maybe it was time to reach out to those resources again, get back into therapy, talk to my doctor about potentially getting back on my anti-anxiety medication, which I am. And that, making those subtle changes and that has helped me navigate, because I still have really big emotions. I still have moments of where I feel the anxiety kind of coming on, but now that I've been kind of regulating and consistent with my sessions and taking time for myself, it's been a lot easier to recognize when a big emotion's coming on and therefore being able to navigate it moving forward.
I love that. Yeah. And that's so powerful of you, to share that and know that, like, even though it's a common thing that women go through, that you can get through it with the proper medication and having the support and asking for support, whether your village is big or small.
Yeah.
And then with the postpartum depression, I know we also discussed body dysmorphia.
Yes.
And body dysmorphia is something that you've experienced your entire life, or yeah? Yes,
absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of women of color probably hearing this will be able to resonate, but I was like the gordita of the family, right? And it was one of those things where it was supposed to be a term of endearment, and I get it to a certain extent, but I didn't realize until I reached like college how much that started to play into my identity, right? And all of a sudden it played out into how I related with men, right? Feeling unworthy of love, taking myself out of the game, not being afraid to talk to somebody because like, there's no way, I'm not a size 2. I've never been a size 2. That's not who people are attracted to, right? And so I developed really unhealthy eating habits, where I would eat out of stress, eat out of boredom, eat to fulfill, right? Avoid. And then I kind of swung in the other direction. So the year after, my first year of practice, right after law school, I just passed the bar, moved to a new city by myself, and I found at-home workouts, which were great. But I'm a very much, my siblings like to say I have an obsessive compulsive disorder kind of thing, where I just become one-track mind. And so I became a one-track mind and losing weight. And then that became my addiction, right? Working out all the time, eating like to the point where I was guilty eating hot Cheetos for like a little after I ran. I was training I remember at one point I was training for a half marathon plus doing hour-long workouts for 6 days a week and regulating my meals. I've never been thinner, but I've also realized it brought me nothing emotionally. So like the pendulum, right, just keeps swinging back and forth, and then enter my husband, wonderful, reassuring man, and then I get pregnant, and then I don't recognize my body anymore. And then there's all this culture of like that bounce back culture. And that's what I was like, when do I get to bounce back? Like, I'm not losing the weight. I'm doing everything. I started working out again. I wasn't able to breastfeed my son. My milk didn't come in, which also no shame in. That was a whole journey in and of itself, learning that I'm not a bad mom if I don't breastfeed my son. But I always thought, I was like, well, the minute I start to breastfeed, I'm going to totally lose the weight because the calories that you expend on that. But like all of that became about getting my image instead of what breastfeeding is, right? Which is a connection with your newborn. And then if you don't have that opportunity, finding other ways to connect, but everything kind of kept coming back to my image. So finding a way to live in this body that had done a pretty cool thing. Labor was hard to say the least. But we did it. And this body that I'm currently in is very strong. So learning to love that and find that I am still worthy of love, no matter the size, right? And then once you start to accept that, I think I noticed everything else started to kind of click, fall into place. And now 19 months later, like for the first time, I feel like me again.
That makes me really happy. Yeah. And like, as you were talking, like, it just like got me so emotional, you know, because like all the things, you know, being called a certain name growing up, and then just like the pressure of like what we see in media and like what you're supposed to look like. And, you know, I too experienced like feeling like I needed to look a certain way, especially competing in my former years in pageantry. And then, you know, having somebody tell me like the inches on my body and those comments, like it's so triggering and it's just not healthy. And I am learning to like accept myself as well. Like we all have issues with our body. Like no matter what women you talk to, like we're all dealing with some kind of body dysmorphia to a degree. And like I just like applaud you for like sharing your journey and your truth, because I think a lot of women need to hear that. And like also be reminded that like centuries ago, okay, they made like statues of women and their bodies, and their bodies were curvy and beautiful and bold. And I think this like whole society of like how we view beauty and like what's considered beautiful and not beautiful is all BS, to be honest, because like all women, all people are made in all kinds of unique ways. We have beautiful ancestors and just we come from a lineage of like beauty, you know, our own unique DNA beauty. And I think the more that we can like tap into that, this jealousy, this like, you know, competition for other individuals, especially women, like is so unnecessary, because like we all have something to bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And whether that's our features, our personality, our mindset, community, whatever it is, like we all have a part to play. And there's room for all of us to grow and to learn. So I applaud you, you know, for again like sharing your story and being honest about it. This conversation has been like really powerful, and it's touched like just it resonated, you know. So like thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Educating us, you know, about being a lawyer. So for all the girly pops who are listening and are maybe in the process of undergrad and are possibly thinking about becoming an attorney, what advice would you have for these young gals?
Keep going. Keep going. It's not, the road to the top is not a straight road. It's going to look very different for everybody. I think the biggest thing that I took away from law school was I had to do it my way. Even if I took a gap year in between undergrad and law school, and that was something that was really hard, but I realized I needed to do it. And then once law school, like just every road looks so different. So different from what you study in undergrad. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be, you don't have to study. I studied political science. You don't have to study political science to get into law school, you know, follow your passion, make it your own, and then keep going. You're going to get some no's along the way. Like I said, I had to take the LSAT twice. But then by the time I got to the bar, I took that once. So like everything is so different, but even if you have to take the bar twice, it's okay. just if this is what you want out of life, keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Also before we end the show, while you were talking to, I wanted to reach over and give you a hug, and just have you feel my energy. But we have obviously these beautiful flowers for you from our sponsor.
Thank you.
So before we end the show, I guess I wanted to know your connection to roses and why roses are your favorite flowers.
I love roses because of my husband. I've never really been a big flower person because they die. But then I developed a green thumb during COVID. Who didn't, right? But he always, no matter what, we had a little bit of a long distance when we first started dating, so he'd always bring me flowers whenever we would see each other. I got a lot of just because flowers every Mother's Day. Well, we've only had one Mother's Day, but every Valentine's Day, anniversary,
That's beautiful.
So it really just reminds me of him.
I love that. And now you get to take them home and be somebody else got me roses. Well, thank you so much, Jess. You're doing an awesome job. You're killing it in your career. Sounds like you're a wonderful mother. And I look forward to continuing our connection. We just met today and I just feel like we totally hit it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had the greatest time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the MíraLA Podcast. If you are a woman and would like to be on the show, go to MíraLaPodcast.com. Follow us on socials at MíraLA Podcast. Use hashtag MíraLA Mondays. And if you want to support the show, subscribe, share with your amigos, and tune in for new episodes every Monday. Muchas gracias.